Well, I am excited for today's podcast. I get to talk to Giselle Bonetti. She is a sensational, multi-talented woman who has worked in various fields. She's an amazing real estate agent in luxury real estate. She's a business owner for a concierge service, photographer. She has a child-focused international ministry, but probably you might know her for her chefing skills as she has been seen in the Netflix cooking competition, The Easy Bake Battle, and my friend here won the whole thing. And she was nicknamed the Queen of Flavor. And if you know her, the flavor isn't just in her food. She has thousands of followers on Instagram, and she can also be seen on YouTube teaching you how to cook. Thank you so much, Giselle, for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
It is so fun to just like hang out and talk to you. And I know you, but maybe some of my listeners don't know you. So first, tell us about your name, because your name and your cultural background may not seem to fit. So I want you to tell us
they don't at all.
How it's pronounced, what it means.
So interestingly enough, even though I was born in the Dominican Republic, when I did my ancestry DNA, and I always told my husband every time we would go to France, I would walk around. Interestingly, I don't know how to explain it to you. Like I belonged. I literally was like, I belong here. And this is where I belong. These are my people. I don't know why. And he used to think you're crazy. And then we came back and I took my ancestry DNA test. And I was 22% Spaniard and 20% French. And
Wow.
even Jewish background, my grandmother was Jewish. My dad, even though he was also born in the Dominican Republic out of all his older brothers, my family tree goes back to Giuseppe and Luigi Bonnetti from Naples, Italy. And so
wow.
They went over with Napoleon to, back then, it used to be called La Hispaniola, which was the entire island before it got divided with Haiti. And one brother died of the yellow fever, and then the other one stayed. And that's kind of, we're only, if you ask any Dominican, Bonnetti, we're one family. Like we just multiplied within one family. So it's all connected. And my dad had a really European influential background. And his sister, his older sister, went to the hospital to see me when I was born. And my mom and him had a total different name picked out, which, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful for that lady, wherever you are. She looked at my parents, she's like, she doesn't look like that. She looks like a Giselle. And she was really in love with the arts, and she was a little bit more culture. She would travel more. And so my dad was like, okay, then we'll name her Giselle. And so it's spelled for the French way, like the authentic French way. And it's all due to her. But wow. It's so fitting for me because I'm obsessed with everything French. And yeah, and when I got to the States, that I found out that names had meanings, that you could look them up. When you look it up, it says full of grace.
Wow.
Which is pretty ironic because, you know, as a believer in Christ, when I read that, I went, oh, okay. So yeah, I'm full of grace.
That's awesome. Okay, so that goes into, tell us a little bit about yourself. What does it mean to be Giselle?
Oh my gosh, you have time? I'm just a complex person, full of passion for arts. I love arts. I'm obsessed with the culinary world, obviously. I love serving people. Anything I've ever done in my life. I know it really is sales, but I started as a waiter in New York, and people would always hate on me. I was the youngest girl in the crowd and always made the best tips, but I have a servant's heart. I love to serve, and I get an immense gratification to give somebody exactly what they're looking for. Hence why I'm a luxury real estate agent. If you had told me you were looking for a chair with stripes going horizontal kind of thing, I will go to the ends of the world to get it for you. And I also feel the same satisfaction that my customers feel when I deliver. It's interesting because I get the same joy. So I know I'm in the right field. You know that saying that says, when you do what you love, you're not working a day of your life. Well, that's how I feel. So I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a friend. But inside of me, I just didn't want to do one thing. I wanted to do multiple things. So aside from my bread and butter, which is real estate, I wanted to share my passion for cooking. And I started to do that for my customers. Like if I work with a lot of professional athletes, and a lot of them come to South Florida for spring training. Most major teams are down here for that. And when they would, you know, ask me, can you find me a rental while I'm there for spring training? I would stock up their fridge. I would hang their clothes. They would ship everything before. It's part of the whole concierge service. And then I would cook them something. And it would always be like, oh, we're on a strict diet. I'm like, I got you. Don't worry. And then I would get calls from the wives like, oh gosh, now I have to learn this brown rice with veggies that you made. This guy can't stop talking about it. And so one day I got a text from one of my ball players, which I could totally say his name. He's really cool. Christian Vasquez at that time was playing for the Red Sox. And then I had another client of mine who was playing for, I think it was at that time, Washington. He had won the World Series there. And they were both on third base. One was infield, one was playing out, like, you know, hitting the ball and got to third base. And they both looked at each other. And of course, we all follow each other. Thank the Lord for social media. One of them was like, wait, isn't your realtor Giselle? And he was like, yeah. And then he was like, oh my God, have you tried her oxtail? And on a play, they were talking about my food. And so when he called me to tell me that, I had this sense of joy because yes, I love being a realtor and I really, really go above and beyond for my clients. I want to offer them the best. I want the full transparency and give them, you know, the best advice I can. Most of these guys don't live here. So, but when I heard them like raving about my food, it just brought this smile to my face. And I said, oh, I should totally keep, you know, cooking for them and doing this. And so that earned me the realtor chef name kind of situation. And then the part of me that loves children and ministry and giving, it's truly my purpose. I believe that that's the reason why God gave me a body. Everything else is just a talent that he gives us. So we could shine a little bit in our talent and then take that success to glorify him. But really my purpose is children. I know without a doubt, I'm put on this earth to have a voice for them. So there's all these different women inside of me. So, but all of them are compassionate. I love to serve. I have really good taste buds, love to travel. The photography falls in there too. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but that was one of the things when I started 20 something years ago in real estate. In class, they were like, you have to eat, breathe prospecting and cold calling. And if you're going to be successful, all you got to do is 24/7 real estate, real estate, real estate. And at first I was like, if I'm going to be successful, this is all I can do. I can't do anything else. And it's a lie. It's such a lie. It's one of those earthly lies that people tell you. We are so made for much more, so much more. And I'm not saying that if you have a career and that's all you did all your life, that's perfect. Maybe that was all that was placed in your heart. But for me, I had all these desires, you know, I had all these desires. I had all these dreams. I mean, I chased them for the love of God. I went all the way to California, chasing visions and things that I would feel in my heart without knowing that, of course, God is like, no, girl, it's the wrong Hollywood. It's Hollywood, Florida. You're supposed to be Hollywood, Florida, which is where I live.
Yeah. Well,
So,
can you share a little bit more about your cultural heritage and how that informs your life and work?
so I say this all the time. And if I wasn't from there, I'd probably, like I said, would probably want to be French. But I'm so blessed that God chose me to be born in such a happy little island. Dominican people are, if you've ever visited, we receive you at the airport with merengue and dance and a drink. We're very welcoming. We're very warming. Everything for us is a party. I mean, you could be poor as poor can be, but you better believe come Friday, we're going to party. Like, we're just happy people. And so I'm always very grateful that I was born there. I'm super grateful that I'm an American citizen and that my mom had a bigger vision for me and brought me here. I turned 6 here in the States, but I'm so connected. Like, even my cousins are like, dude, how are you so Dominican? Like, they're like, we can't get over how Dominican you are. But I understand now as an adult, what God was doing. I'll tell you a little story. My mom sort of tricked me into like leaving. She's like, we're gonna go visit somebody and come back. It was my first plane ride at 6. And I remember being super excited, like any kid, be getting on a plane. I remember the heat of the tarmac. There was no like bridge to connect to. You had to walk from outside of the plane through that hot heat and then get up all those stairs. And I remember doing that. I remember looking at the plane. I remember that back then the pilot thing was all open. There was no door to close it. I remember looking at all this machinery and just everything was so exciting for me. And I also remember standing. I was actually physically standing, but yet the window was above my head and I was looking out the tarmac. And I remember saying, okay, goodbye, like goodbye, Dominican Republic, I'll be back, kind of thing. And when I said that internally, this is the first time I audibly heard the Holy Spirit. The first time ever. I remember that I thought, what was that and who said that? I heard, you will be back because you're going to help. And I remember like looking up and like, who said that? And so that always stayed in my heart, like I would be back. How and in what manner? I didn't know, but it stuck to me. And so I always felt this connection, that feeling never left. So I always, even when my own children were born, I kept the same food traditions for Christmas and the things that I grew up with. My mom is one of 6 sisters. And growing up, we didn't have a lot when we got here. But just watching all my aunts in the kitchen cooking and me being the only niece or daughter in between their legs, wanting to see how they're peeling the garlic and what is that smell? I would come running. I could be playing, and if a smell hit me, I would come running. Go, whoa, what are you guys doing now? Of course, they would be like, get out of the kitchen, get out of the kitchen. But all those traditions, the loud music playing in the background and people dancing. And I remember we went to visit an uncle of mine in New York and he had this tiny little apartment. We could barely dance, but we didn't care. We were just happy to be together. All those things, I'm extremely, extremely, grateful for that background, that togetherness. And I feel that really describes what we are. As far as, the tradition of Dominican people, I mean, I don't see how that's any different than we're island people. Like I live in Miami and I listen to Cubans and the way that they eat, and it's all very connected. It's interesting. And then maybe they do things a different way, but we're all very connected. So I didn't really feel a culture shock when I moved to Miami because I was surrounded by so many Cubans and the food seemed familiar to me. I guess my biggest challenge was English. It wasn't my first language. So that was something that I, of course, got bullied for and, all the things that happen to kids. But I never really, DR has always been in my heart. I know I'm a flight away, but in my heart, it's just like literally right here. I could literally, my husband's always like, I hate that you can do that. I could be walking. You don't even have to talk. And I'll tell him, oh, that person's Dominican. It's crazy. And he's like, no way. I'm like, okay, we'll see. I'll go ask. And then they'll be like, yeah, I am. And then he's like, how do you do that? I'm like, I know my people.
Yep. Yep. It's the same thing with like, if you are engulfed in the culture, even though people may look similar, yeah, you can just tell. It's the same thing with Indian people. That I could see somebody be like, oh, that person's from North India. That person's from like the South. And yeah, it's just something. And then if you tell me your name, I 100% know where you are from, because our names are very geographical. So it's, and then yeah, people are like, well, how did you know that? I'm like, it's our identity, right? It's who we are. So when you, okay, so you came to the States when you were 6, and then you started your life here. What did you imagine your life would be like as an adult?
So let me back up a little bit. I remember, and this is where this whole chasing this dream or this vision, I want to call it a vision because I was wide awake. I don't know if this happens in India, but in the Dominican Republic back in the day, I think still today that happens. The power would just go out of nowhere.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I come back whenever it felt like. Sometimes it'd
Yep.
be a day, 2 minutes, an hour. Okay, that kind of stuff.
My parents just came back from India and they were talking about the electricity, how it's 24 hours a day now. I'm like, wait, when did that, like, you don't have to worry, like something's gonna go out. And they're like, not anymore, at least where my uncle lives. I was like, that's such a vivid memory for me to be there. And at any point we're gonna start lighting candles, which was fun when you're a kid. And the rhythm of your life is not based on the electricity. It's really based more on nature.
Right. I remember people would like, and all radios would be blasting. You would hear the plants turn off. It was this whole fiasco when the light would go out and come back in. It was like a Christmas, like a waking up Christmas day, like. But I remember I was about 5. I have a very clear, vivid memory. I was drinking my chocolate milk in my Fred Flintstone bottle. I know my mom spoiled me. I'm an only child on her side. And I was sitting on our bedroom in the master, and she had this very old, bulky TV with big antennas. And the TV was placed right before the door into the bathroom. And I remember she was doing her makeup, and I was watching TV and it turned off, like the power left. But I glanced over back at her in the bathroom, watching her do her makeup while I just drank my bottle. And I saw an image on the TV for a second, and I thought, oh, power's back. So I glanced back at the TV, and I'm not sure how to explain this. This might sound crazy, and if anybody has ever had one of those future visions, then you know what I'm talking about. I saw myself as an adult. I don't know how to explain to you. I just knew that that person there was me, and I was cooking on TV. Like I was in the TV and I was cooking. And I jumped off the bed, running to go see where this image came from. And I started like inspecting the back of the TV. And my mom's like, what are you doing? And she actually remembers this conversation. And I said, how do people get in here? And she laughed and she's like, it's a transmission, my love. It's an antenna. It picks up. And I'm like, no. I'm here. And I saw myself in there. And she started laughing. Of course, like any 5-year-old, she's like, oh, you're just, imagining things. I'm like, no, mommy, I swear it was me. Like I knew that was me. And she was like, what were you doing? And I was like, I was cooking. And so when I got here to the States, my biggest punishment, no joke. It wasn't like you can't go out and ride your bike. It wasn't, you can't hang out. It was, you are not allowed to be in the kitchen for the weekend. That was my biggest punishment, because I would get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, whatever time it was, to peel plantains and make mango, which is like a very traditional breakfast for us. And then I would come with this like napkin over my thing, and I would bring it in a tray with my mom, and I would be banging stuff, and I'm sick, so I would make a horrible mess. And she would yell at me, can't you just be like a normal child and sleep in and watch cartoons? Like, she just was like really concerned that her daughter constantly wanted to be in the kitchen. But growing up, I would mention how I wanted to do culinary. And of course, I don't blame her. I understand. now I'm a parent and I understand that in the Dominican Republic, that wasn't a career. That wasn't something that you looked at as like, oh, this is something that you're passionate about. No, this was just a job. There was no one making anything good out of it or making a name for themselves out of it, or for that matter, having a successful, and I don't mean by being famous, I mean by being able to own a place and buy a car. Like that
Pay
was
the
not
rent. Yeah.
Yeah, that was not the case. That was just a regular job, go cook and come back. So she got really scared when I told her that. She's like, there's no way I sacrificed everything I sacrificed to bring you here till you could cook for anybody. She was like, figure out something else to do. And so that kind of crushed me, because also as a Christian child, I accepted Christ when I was 8. I wanted to honor my parents. I wanted, the Bible says, honor your parents, listen to them, that kind of stuff. So I was like, okay, I'll just, do it and be involved with my family. My cousins after school would beg me, Tio, can you make us a sandwich? Can you cook for us? Like, I always was the one in the kitchen cooking, always. Like my aunts would go out to work and come back and they would call me and ask me. I'm talking about 8, 9 years old.
Wow.
And they would be like, what did you make? I'm like, a roasted chicken. And, so that kind of stayed in me from having that. So when I realized, okay, well, I'm not going to make that happen the way my mom wanted it, but I could, she got married several times. That's another podcast. And one of those marriages led us to New York. And for sure, I thought, oh, this is it. I'm going to New York. This is it. Because if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere.
Anywhere. Yep.
So I thought, all right, we're leaving South Florida. I was a junior in high school. And I was like, this is going to be it. This is going to be me on TV cooking. And of course, I got into the whole communications and theater. I went to LaGuardia Community College. While I was there, I met a gentleman who was doing like a little off-Broadway play kind of situation. And he was like, I think you're great at it, but we're going to do it in LA. And I was like, LA? I'm like, I've only been living here for like 4 years, or 3 or 4 years at that time. And I was like, I don't know anybody in LA. So he was like, well, come check it out. So I ended up going. I remember visiting someone who had a garbage disposal. And after growing up in South Florida, I was like, oh God, I need this in my life. Because New York does not have that anywhere. Well, when I lived out there. And so I was like, oh, I could do LA. I think I'm going to do that. So I left New York and I went to LA again. I was chasing this instead of surrendering it, allowing God to lead me. But I'm so grateful for New York. So many things happened to us that were not good, like our house burned. They stole my car. One of my dogs that I had that I brought from Miami, they also stole my dog. Like there were so many things that my mom's marriage didn't work out. And that was really detrimental, because now I'm at an age where I can really sense heartbreak. I'm 15, 16, and I'm watching my mom go through this horrible divorce. And she uprooted her life for this man and it didn't work out. So I started building all these traumas, like, well, men are not worth it kind of thing. I'm not going to waste my time wanting to have a boyfriend, where most girls my age, that's what they wanted to do.
Right.
I was interested in working and figuring out what my next move was. So I left New York with this hope and this thing that I was like, oh, this is what I needed. And then I got to LA and it was like, wah, wah, wah. Because nothing fit with me. I couldn't find a church to plant myself. I guess, let me back up. Even though New York was so horrible, it had its moments, I encountered the presence of God when I was 17 in my bedroom. And it's one of those moments, I can't even talk about it without getting teary-eyed. But it was one of those moments that gives you conviction, that you could put a trigger to my head and you could say what you want to say. I will never denounce him and deny him, because I know I experienced. I was awake. I saw what I saw. I felt what I felt. And I knew, okay, you're real. I'm never going to doubt you again. I'm never going to question you again. And it just, even though all those things happened to me, I'm so grateful for New York because I got baptized. It was a decision that my parents didn't do for me as a child. Like, this was me wanting to fully commit. And so I got baptized. I remember in this tub, because it was freezing the year that I got baptized. I remember getting baptized by this girl, I'll never forget her name, Melanie. And I became a part of the New York Church of Christ. And when I went to LA, I felt that that was missing for me, that community. You know, the enemy tries hard to put people in your life to like throw you off. And, you know, I just couldn't find my footing in LA. And even though it was beautiful, I'm very grateful for the experience. I lived in a really good area, so I was constantly bumping into movie stars, which is pretty cool. I mean, I was what, 19, 20? So it was pretty cool to have those experiences. Some people were nice, some people weren't, but that's life. And then I met George in one of my trips back home. Do you remember 1999 when everybody said, come 2000, hide your money, take it out of banks, clocks are going to go crazy? I thought, well, if this is going to go down, I might as well go back home and be with my family. So after 6 years of not coming to South Florida, I came back and I met my husband. I mean, of course, I had no idea I would be marry him and coming back. I just thought it was going to be, oh, this guy I met in Miami. But we dated for like 11 months, long distance. He's a fireman, so he would work one full week together and then have a couple of weeks off, and he would come out and visit me, and he loved it out there, to the point that I got home one day and I found a LAFD application, and I'm like, what is this? And he's like, well, you know, he's 7 years older than me, so he was like, I don't want to have you give up your dream, so I'll just become a fireman there. And I was like, ooh, I don't know if I want you to do that, because I was out there by myself. He had 3 other brothers here, his mom, his career. He had already 6 years on the department. That would mean starting from scratch. And I just, you know, again, I prayed about it. And I thought, okay, I don't have much to give up here. Not really doing much. And that's the truth. I was like, I'll go back to be with you. If it doesn't work out, I'll just come back to LA. So I kept paying my apartment secretly for 9 months. And then when I realized, okay, forget it. I love this guy and I'm going to marry this guy. So then I called the landlord. I was like, I'm not coming back, lady. Your apartment has been empty. I've just been paying rent. But that brought me back to South Florida. And so I decided, okay, I'm still young. I was 22 years old. I thought, let me do something wise with the little bit of money I made. And I bought a house, which thank God I did, because at that age, you know, nobody's thinking of that. And I settled down and I thought, okay, I need to get myself into something. And I started to go to broadcasting school at BCC. But in the interim of buying the house, it was pre-construction. And the lady at the construction place said, do you have an attorney to review your contracts? And I said, well, why do I need an attorney? She says, sweetie, this is a house. It's a binding contract. You must get an attorney to review it. And like God would have it, I was driving down Pines Boulevard, hitting University, and I saw a big sign, huge sign that said, learn how to read contracts and get your real estate license for $4.99 or $3.99, right? And the lady that I had called to read the contract, the attorney was charging me $600. So I thought, I saved myself some money. I learned how to read contracts. I'll take the course. And I took it with no intentions of making this into a career at all. I was still enrolled in school and all that. And then the professor, which I know it's totally God-led, everything now I know, it's like you look back and you put all the pieces together. He said, so tell me, Bonnetti, where are you hanging your license? And I go, hanging it? I just came here so that I could buy my place. And he's like, you're kidding me. You're perfect for this. Like, you knew all the right questions to ask, your personality. And I was like, oh, I don't know. And then he was like, listen, do me a favor. Try it for a year. And he actually said to me, start off in a team with someone, learn the ropes, and then go on your own and see what happens. And so I listened. I had nothing else to do. And I signed up with the team, and it's 20 something years later, and I've been, doing real estate.
Wow, that's amazing. Like, because I didn't know this part of your story. I'm like, yeah, because you didn't plan it.
No.
You were living your life
Yeah.
and making bold choices. And it sounds like God was like, okay, here's the next step. You weren't expecting this, but this is what I have for you.
Correct.
Which is
That's literally the story of my life. Never expecting anything and him saying, I have something for you. Yeah, totally.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. That's really rich and encouraging. And then there's, so the George piece. So George is not Dominican, correct?
He's Colombian. Interesting enough, he's Lebanese and Colombian. His grandfather was born in Jordan, which is why we wanted to take the kids there, just because it felt like, going back to his roots. He has the total Lebanese look, the light eyes, the very, very dark hair, but he was born in Colombia. And he also came, funny story, he went to the same middle school that I went to when he first got to the US. Out of all the places, he went to Stirrup. And we crack up now because he's 7 years older than me, but I'm like, maybe I sat on my future husband's chair and I didn't even know it. But yeah, and even though he's Colombian, he's from the coast of Colombia, so they're very also island folks. Our foods are very similar. But I call him my white boy because he didn't even know Sofia Vergara was Colombian. And she's from Barranquilla. So when I met him, I'm like, do you know that this woman is? And he's like, what? Here I am settling for you, and this is what I have back home.
That's hilarious.
So I broke him a little bit. I brought him over to the Hispanic side.
Yeah.
He's my little Cooper City boy. But yeah, he's great. He's one of the greatest blessings of my life.
Do you feel cultural differences then within your marriage because of his background and the way you all like come to situations? And there are some cultural backgrounds that have a reputation for being like loud and boisterous, and then there are other cultures that are like more reserved. Did you have any things like that?
We're both loud.
Yeah.
Both Colombians and us. Actually, people from Barranquilla are considered curramberos, which just means party animals, like they party. But honestly, it was a little bit more him bringing me to the American side. I learned country music with him. I discovered Garth Brooks with him and the Dixie Chicks. I had no idea of any of that. Like coming back to South Florida when I decided, okay, we're gonna commit to each other. I really didn't want to live in Miami. So I live in Broward County, just 30 minutes away, but I didn't want the craziness of Miami. And I mean, my gosh, today it's 10 times worse, but I really just wanted something different. And he was like, well, why don't you look up at houses where I grew up? And so when I was up here and he introduced me to his friends and they were doing, I've never been to a Dolphin game, and they were doing those cookouts that you wake up like 4 hours before a game just so you can hang out and eat. But I was there for the food because I was the girl that I was like, I'll season the chicken, I'll wash it. Like so he introduced me to this side that I didn't have. He grew up around these kids, and here he is, a grown adult and still hanging out with his middle school and elementary friends. And I didn't have that because I moved a lot, So I was intrigued by that, and I loved how close they all were. And so I was like, oh, I think I want to live up here. I don't think I want to buy in Miami. And so it was almost not a culture shock with him being from Colombia because we're very similar in a lot of things. It was more him bringing me into more of my American side, So I'm always grateful to him for that. He always said, I listened to the Dixie Chicks the entire way from LA driving back to Miami. And he is like, if I ever have to hear those women sing one more time. Looking back, it was really nice. the way that we both blended our traditions together.
That's beautiful. I watch your life on Instagram. You have two different IG accounts. One is more personal, one's more cooking. And that's how we met, because you were cooking an Indian dish.
Chicken tikka masala.
Yes. And it's been so fun to like have that connection with you. But then like we've grown closer in the past years because of all our other interests. But as I watch you doing all the things you're talented in, you know, you've lived a very full life and you're still so young. And I wonder if you could go back to 18-year-old Giselle, what would you say to her?
I would say, don't be in such a rush. I was always in a rush to get somewhere. I was always in a rush to do something of meaning. I always had the sensation of like, I have to have meaning, I have to follow purpose. And I would say to anybody right now who feels that way, it's gonna come. It's gonna come. What is meant for you shall never pass you. It's gonna come. Maybe not when you want it, maybe not when you're expecting it, maybe not when you're youthful and you think, oh, this is the time to put me on TV because everything is nice and tight and perky. No, it's what's meant for you is gonna come. And I would just say, be present. I'm not saying sit back and don't do anything. You know, when I got into real estate, I was selling medium average prices where I lived. It's what I knew. And so they tell you, know your products. That's what I knew. And one day when I was cooking, shout out to Carlos Justo, who's no longer in the business, but he's the one that started the whole $1 million listing thing. His vision was a small group of agents who dominate the market. That was his vision. And so that makes sense. Why would I want to hire people off the street who have never sold a multi-million-dollar property when I can take this girl whose mom is going to give me all the leads because she just wants to help her kid? See what I'm saying? So that made sense. So I kept pushing for it and praying for it. And one day when I called the manager, another guy, Carlos, said, you know, you keep calling us and we keep turning you down and we're in the middle of a move. I don't have any time for you. So I said, okay, I'll help you move. If you just give me 5 minutes, I'll help you move. And when he said that, he goes, you're willing to come down here and help us move just so that I can hear you for 5 minutes to tell you no. And I said, yes. So he gave me the shot. And I went and I sat in a meeting, which looking back, I know it's so God ordained, where people were talking about, I think at that time, Enrique Iglesias was selling his house. And they brought up Shakira's name, they brought up that name. And I felt like, you know, that clip in a movie where your knees are shaking underneath the desk, but you're like trying to keep your composure because you're like, I belong here. But deep down inside, you're like, oh my God, I cannot believe I'm here. So I was sitting there and I'll never forget, his name is Ralph Arias. I love him. I learned so much from them. Those boys, well, they're grown men, but those men were amazing to me because I was the youngest agent there. And he brings up the fact, Carlos is doing his sales and he's asking everybody, how's it going with your client? How's it going with your client? And he says, well, what happened with Martinez? That's all I heard him say, Martinez. And he goes, oh, I took him, but we never got off. We never got on the boat. And he goes, what do you mean you never got on the boat? He goes, no, when I got there, that we were waiting for the ferry, he looked at me and he goes, what are we doing here? And I said, oh, we're waiting for the ferry so we could go look at the penthouse. And he laughed at me and he was like, are you kidding me? I'm Dominican. I don't make lines to get to my house. So I chuckled out loud without realizing. And then it hit me who he was talking about. He was talking about Pedro Martinez, one of the best pitchers in the league in history to this day, like Hall of Famer kind of thing. And I kind of went like that. And Carlos looked over and he was like, what's so funny? And who are you? Because he didn't even know I was going to be in the meeting. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I was like, I'm Giselle and I was invited. And then I'm just sitting listening on your meeting. And he goes, well, why did you think that was funny? And I looked over at Ralph and I said, I'm not laughing at you at all. It's just that that's so true. Dominican people do not make lines or wait, especially if you're buying a $6 million penthouse. You think I'm going to stand out here and wait for a ferry to come pick me up? Because it was Fisher Island and you can't access the island without the ferry. So I said, so he says, love her, and that's what you need to do. Know your client. And when he said that, it opened the door for me because he goes, I want to talk to you. And so that landed me a job as an agent with them. And of course, at that time, I was like, I'll do whatever I have to do. I lived in Broward, so the drive down to Brickell was brutal, but I attended the meetings, I went. And then one day he said to me, where do you live? And I said, I live in Broward. Kind of a little bit embarrassed to say because here I am surrounded by people with listings. The minimum listing at that time in that office was $5 million back 20 years ago. So now you can imagine, but I was like, in Broward, like not saying much. And he goes, well, I'm opening up an office in Fort Lauderdale. And he was like, do you want to go work out of that office? And I was like, oh my God, that would be great. Because it saved me all this traffic time. So I got there. Funny story. And this is a great testimony. And I won't mention her name because I don't want to, make her feel bad about it because things happen. But when I first started going to real estate school, my husband had this friend of his who was also a fireman. He was married to a beautiful girl, great woman. She was a realtor. And I said, hey, I'm taking the course and I'm about to go take my state exam. And I'm so excited. Do you have anything you want to share with me? So she was like, oh, let me show you the MLS, which is the multiple listing system. This is how you look for houses. And she got on. And I remember just like I am now, she was on her computer and I was literally hovering over her looking. And she pulls up all the listings. And the top most expensive property in Broward County at that time was Dan Marino's house. Another Hall of Famer football player. Like this guy is like a god for South Florida. And at that time, his house was like $18 million. And I voiced it. And I said, wow, how cool would it be to have a listing like that? I just and she turned around and she laughed. Girl, you know the years that you need to be in this business and the connections that you need to have to get something like that? He goes, it's impossible. She was like, shoot for something else, like kind of stuff. And I said that with all intentions of good, like, wow, I would love to have a listing like that. Not knowing that 4 years later, after having my license and being moved to Broward County, Mr. Marino would walk into that office and say, I didn't sell my house with this last person. I think Sotheby's is the way to go. And who would be in charge of him? Me.
Wow.
I was on a one-on-one basis with Claire and Dan. Like my husband was like, I am having an outer body experience. I would stay up with a radio as a little kid to hear this man play. And you are now on the phone with like one of my biggest heroes. And when my son was born, my second child, the first basket that came into the hospital, which I totally told the guy, you have the wrong room. Because it was crazy big, it was expensive. And I was like, I think you have the wrong room. And he goes, no, Giselle. And I said, yeah. And I'm like, who sent me this? And it was Claire and Dan. And
Wow.
they just adored me. And she was like, I trust you in my house full-heartedly. It was just God's favor constantly. Like here I was managing this listing 4 years into having my real estate license, where people told me it would be impossible. And, I know she didn't mean it in a bad way, but her laugh was a little bit like, yeah, right, girl, you are a dreamer kind of thing. And so.
And she was right. You were a dreamer, but not a dreamer in like silliness, like having vision.
Right. And again, I think it's the desires of our hearts, there's a lot of things that I see that I don't desire and that I don't voice and say, oh, I want that, because it's not in my heart. It wasn't, I wholeheartedly believe, because the Bible says it, even before I formed you, I already had a plan for you. So when we come into this earth and all these traumas and all these things and life and people and negativity come, we struggle with the soul and the spirit that knows, girl, you were made for this. And then we struggle with the external of, I don't know. I don't think I do. I don't think I can kind of situation. And so said, and you know, we start comparing, but God is like, greater is he that lives in you than he that lives in the world, girl. Like, that's exactly what I felt him telling me. And so that opened doors for me. And till this day, if I see Dan and I say hi, he remembers me. It's that kind of recognition that I want it because I served him well. I did the best that I could. I served him well with integrity. And I never saw him as this all-star. I never looked at him. I saw him as a father. I saw him pick up his girls from school. He had adopted 2 girls from China. And I would watch him, you know, be a husband. And I started to just see people in a different light. Yes, he had a 20,000 square foot home on 4 acres, but he was humble and he was normal Dan, like just normal man with his wife and living his life. And so I'm grateful for all my experiences with all my affluent clients and all that, because it also expanded my vision. You know, I would walk around and see hallways and hallways of trips, and I'm talking about Africa and India and like these things that they would do. And I remember saying, oh, I want that one day. You know, I want that one day. I want to give that to my kids. I don't want to drive expensive cars and collect stuff. I want to collect memories. And I got a lot of that from experiencing my client's life. You know, I don't have those millions, but God showed me you don't have to have those millions to live a rich life, because everybody's definition of a rich life is different.
And really, a lot of richness is how you perceive yourself, and how, like, it's not about socioeconomic background, but how you see your life well lived. And that can be done poorly if you have lots of money, and you can be done really well if you don't have money. And so it's neat to see that you've been able to interact with people from all ends, right, of the spectrum. And you have lived a lot of that spectrum yourself. And yeah, I think we learned big life lessons through that. So that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm sure people listening would be like, wait, Dan Marino? I just like, right. And so it's interesting to also hear people are people, right?
Yeah.
That, I mean, some people think highly of themselves, but people are people. And what you keep demonstrating is your love of people. And I feel like that's so firmly rooted in your identity. Like, you know who you are. And
Right.
obvious in your faith, you know that you are a child of your heavenly Father, and therefore you are a princess in the kingdom of God, because that's your position. And so you walk around, yeah, that's my position.
And you know, for those that are listening, I remember once I won the Easy Bake Battle, somebody posted on comments, who are these people? And why are we giving money to people who got married in Hawaii and stuff like that? And I thought, you know, it's so easy just to write and talk about people that way. Because if you only knew everything I had to do and the things that I had to go through. And, you know, but I've come to find out that if it's not me, it's not just me. It's just that I own and believe what God says about me. For years, I didn't. And your life changes. You start walking with this confidence. It's not cockiness. It's a confidence that you know who goes before you and you know who has your back. Now, I was a believer since I was 8. I told you, I raised my hand myself and went up to the altar call. No parent leading me, no nothing. But it took me years to walk in that authority and to understand, oh, you are my God. And if you place something in my heart, I'm going to go for it. If it doesn't work out, fine. It leads you to something else, to someone else. For example, you I know you found my chicken tikka masala recipe funny, but look at the link. You were the one that told me, hey, they're auditioning for this home cooking thing, and you came into my mind. I was like, well, okay, I'll look at it. And then you hit me up again, like 2 weeks later. Did you put in for that? And I'm like, oh, I didn't. And then I did it, not knowing in a million years that that would lead me to Netflix, a global show where people wrote to me from Brazil, from all over. Like, I saw your story, I bawled with you. I think one of the most touching messages I got, it was a mother who said, after I saw your story on there, I called my daughter and I told her, the money is yours. You don't have to go to college if you don't want, and you can open up your bakery. Because her daughter was like, I don't want to go to college. I want to be a baker. I want to open up a bakery. And she goes, and after seeing your story, I was like, I don't want to be that person. And so you think you're doing things for yourself. You think you're checking off boxes for yourself, but it's like a domino effect. There's so many people that are touched by the things that you share, that are touched by your story. So yeah, I earned it. I was the girl that got married in Hawaii and had a very small wedding and paid very little because I didn't have the means to have parents who wanted to give me a lavish wedding, but that was a choice for me. And but I deserved every round that I won. Like, you have no idea. That's why I cried. I know people were like, oh, sob story. No, I don't want to cry on TV. No one wants to cry on TV. But when Anthony asked me, what are you feeling? And I said, you have no idea the journey it took for me to get here. I'm in my 40s. I literally heard God, like, I was okay with it. I was like, okay, you could put this dream aside. I'm healthy kids, not perfect, but great husband. I have a really good career. I'm good. I've traveled, I'm good. I just felt like, just take this out of my heart, this cooking thing. Like, it's good. We're good, God. And I remember praying in the morning, because you have to have relationship. That's another thing that people are like, oh, what do you mean you hear from him? Well, you can't hear from people that you don't speak to. So I was praying in the morning, having a conversation with my Heavenly Father, and I heard him say, Giselle, separate your food from real estate. And this is literally me. What? Like, literally, I was like, no, Lord, not one more thing. I cannot add one more thing to my calendar. And I heard him say, which is funny that you said that, I have something for you. And that's what led me to a completely different audience, which, excuse me, led me to meet you. And I don't know, 14,000 other people that I didn't know before who had a love for cooking as well, like me. Excuse me, hold on. So it led me to you. It led me to 14,000 other people that I didn't know in my life. And it's also another way and another platform for me to share my testimonies. There's, especially now, we're living in an era where everybody's like, we're doomed. It's going to be worse. Everything is bad. Everything we eat is bad. Everything we watch is bad. Like, yes, we can obviously see darkness expose itself so much more than when we were growing up, you and I. I mean, like, it's in your face right now. But at the same time, there's so much good. There's so many great stories to tell and ways that people have triumphed and met their goals and ways where I myself could never do it. There's a higher power at work here. And so I want to share that. I want people to know that it can happen for you if you're in your 40s. You just have to be obedient. Like, I honestly, when I heard God tell me, separate your food from real estate, I was like, okay, Lord, I'm going to sit on this one for a little bit because I want to make sure it's you telling me this. And then the next day I said, okay, I'll make a deal. I'm very Moses-like. If I go to Instagram, because my name it's not the most common, but it's also not a strange name. And Cooking with Giselle, the way that you spell my name is available, then I know it's you and I'll do it. I go in there big fat letters, available. I'm like, okay, we're doing this. And I remember I was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it G style. I know how I like to do my stuff. I did a photo session. I bought lights. I bought a camera to photograph my food. I mean, I literally put myself into debt with Best Buy, but I was like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it the way I want to do things. And my husband was like, spending all this money on this, and who's going to watch you? And I don't you think it's a little bit presumptuous to call yourself a chef? You've never even stepped foot in a culinary school. And for a second, he had me. For a second, he had me like, oh, maybe I should take the name chef off of there and just put food blogger or something. So I did. And then again, my Heavenly Father was like, put the name back on. Like literally, like put the name back on. This is what I called you. This is what you do. And the fact that you never had to take a class, and then literally, I'm not kidding you. Did Beethoven go take a class? No. Mozart? No. They sat there. The talent was in them. So I changed it back. And I begged God, if you give me any sort of audience to watch. I never thought of a TV competition show. Never. It wasn't in my radar. I just thought, this is a good way for me to communicate with people and share how to make simple, easy, delicious meals for a busy mom. Because that's my life. I'm a busy mom. I had kids in sports, jobs, everything. So when I launched it, it was October. Well, I journal everything. I got the download from the Lord in September, and in October I fully launched. And I did the little video intros and all that stuff. And then 2020 came around the corner. I did this in 2019. And of course, you know what happened. The world went on to a total standstill. Nobody could go out to eat. Nobody could order in. And people were desperate to learn how to make meals. And it just took off. And, you know, like I said, it led me to you. It led me to so many people that I now call friends and that I have met who have been a blessing in my life. And of course, it came with an extra $75,000 that I look at my husband now and I tell him, nowhere near the money I spent on lights and photos. And even in that, I know he wants the best for me. I know he wants to encourage me. I know he believes in me. But he felt like, I want to protect you. What if you're shooting too high and then you're just going to fall flat on your face? And he wanted to protect that part of me as a husband. But sometimes even your own spouse will tell you you're dreaming. Like even your own spouse, even your own parent. It doesn't mean that they don't believe in you. It just, they're afraid that you're going to get hurt and that you're not going to succeed and that. And he knew how hard it was for me to leave LA because I thought this is my one shot. And I left. Like, seriously, what big star comes out of Miami? Nobody. Like, it's just not heard of. It's either New York or Los Angeles kind of thing. And I've been to both and nothing happened. So I thought, for sure, this is done. Like, I'm just going to leave it. And God is like, no, I have something for you. And the next step is be obedient. I mean, nothing made sense to me at that time. I didn't know COVID was coming. I didn't know, it would be a thing for home cooks on TV. I mean, for the love of God, have you seen everything on TV now? It's just people winging it, just, winging it, bake-offs and things like that. People that have never stepped foot in a school. So it just validated so many things for me to be on Netflix and to be part of such a great show. It had such a diversity. The judges were amazing. And like I said, it's just one of those things that I want to share with people. You're not too late. You're not too old. And what God has for you will come. It will never pass you.
Such a great story, the way that you're playing out all these different dreams, visions, and it doesn't have to all happen today. Like you have your whole life, and it's neat to see how all these different things have happened in your life for a purpose, for a reason, for this specific time, right? So thank you so much for sharing all that. There's so many stories about your life, and I love how you're like so transparent on your Instagram, sharing yourself vulnerably. If you do not follow her, you need to go follow her at two different, actually three spots now, right? What are your
Yes,
three?
I launched my photography page because at first I was just doing it again for friends, and there's this little human that came in. She's a little vision that God gave for me too. I'm very grateful. I know I have the spirit of discernment without a doubt. I hear him clearly when he tells me steer away from this person. I've listened to conversations of people where I've not been in the room, and I confront them and they're like, wow, I had no idea she had you on the line. And I'm like, I wasn't on the line. You know, like, so I'm grateful for that. But then I discovered there's a little bit of a prophetic in me. And so while I was praying for a friend who was asking me what was going to happen to me in my life, I had a vision of her and a baby. And Emma came into my life through a friend who also came into my life through social media, and I love her dearly. And I started taking pictures of her and posting them, and her mom would post them, and people would be like, who took those? And she would beg me, please just throw a price out there. People want you to take pictures of them. And then I was like, you know what? My kids are older. They started to drive. I didn't have to be everywhere at all the times for them. And I thought maybe this is the season for this. I prayed about it. You always pray about everything. And I said, okay, I'm going to do this. And so I started taking pictures and offering my services, and I love it. Again, I feel it's so interesting because people say when you get into your 40s, it's like the best because it's an easy and a hard no to tell people. You don't really care what people think of you at this point. You don't really care how they perceive you. It just kind of rushes on my, so it's easy to tell people, can't do that, can't be there, sorry, can't attend that. And then you start really like doing the things that you're passionate about and the things that you love. Like I could be in a kitchen for hours and I don't even feel it. I show up to my clients' houses for decoration because, you know, I do that too. And they'll be there picking out this and that. And then I'll see that they have a chicken out. And I'm like, can I make dinner for you while you do that? And they'll be like, sure. I'm like, okay. So as you get older, you lose this sense of like shyness. I mean, I never really had much of it, but you know, like I'm extra bold now. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go for it. I don't care. I don't care that I don't have a studio. I do it in my house. I figured out a way, you know, when there's a will, there's a way. You just do it. And I decided to launch Good Things by G, which there's more good things to come. I'm working on a designing of an apron. And I want those proceeds to go to the foundation. I haven't really spent a lot of time in that since COVID, and a lot of things have changed. Even a lot of places that I used to go to give have changed. So I really feel in my heart now, I don't know how, like everything in my life, I don't know how, but I feel the Lord telling me buy some land and build something where you can actually house these kids, and I could see their progress and I can see them grow up. And so that's my next goal. When and how, I don't know, but that's what's in my heart. And Good Things by G is going to be like a little bit of, I want to call it like a little bit of a branding where all the good things about what's happening in my life and what God is doing in my life and how we can help each other is all going to come under that umbrella. So there's a lot of other stuff that is going to come. I'm still working on a book where I'm putting together a lot of the things that we talked about, my experiences, hearing the voice of God, literally, not kidding you, having his favor in almost everything that I touch. And so I want to share on that, and then also my win and some recipes while I'm at it. So yeah, a lot. It's a lot, girl.
It's a lot, and I'm so excited for all of it and how you use all of it to share with the world so that everybody else can benefit from it. So thank you so much for sharing everything. We're going to have the links for all the Instagrams and YouTube on this podcast. But yeah, thank you for sharing your life, Giselle.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much for reaching out and for being my friend. I'm so happy that when you came to South Florida with your husband, you picked up the phone and said, let's have dinner. And I can't wait to go visit you. and cook with you. And I know that God has amazing things for you as well. I'm also very grateful to have you as a sister, that I can send you a quick text when I need prayer, and that we cover each other, because God says you need that. And I love that. I love that. And people always say, oh, you're not open to other people. I'm open to everybody. As long as you don't try to infiltrate anything into my life, I'm open to everybody, because I do believe that God hates the sin, but he loves the sinner. He loves us all. And I love that he says, I came to you even in your sin. This has nothing to do with me being a believer and then just having all these things. No, everybody has all these things planned out for them from before conception. It's having the veil lifted and taken off the blinders to see, oh, I deserve this. This is meant for me. And then God just starts peeling back the layers, and he starts molding and correcting you. It doesn't take away your essence. I'm still love dancing. I'm still the loud one in the crowd. I'm still the one that will say something completely inappropriate. Totally. But my heart is my heart, and God knows my heart. And so I think that so many people feel like we need to walk around with a halo in our head and be super duper perfect. But no, he's not looking for perfection. He loves to use ordinary people to do extraordinary things.
Agreed. Well, thank you. Everybody keep up with Giselle's journeys, and one day you might see us both cooking together, having a dance party to 80s music. That's what's going to happen.
Thank you so much. Love you.
Thank you.
Bye, Mama.